Welcome back to the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm Aaron Brightman. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the podcast Mike Teel to talk about Rutgers football and being bowl eligible before Halloween on its bye week. Mike, thanks so much for being back.
I appreciate it. Like we were just talking before we started this. Can't believe that, we're three-quarters of the way through already. It's unbelievable how fast it's gone. But good things for the Scarlet Knights being bowl eligible before Halloween.
I guess winning makes time fly, and it's been a great season so far. Just want to know you kind of, I guess, that your biggest takeaways or impressions from this team so far this season.
Well, I think what is it, 5-0 at home right now? I think that's important, especially now being in the Big Ten. You have to be able to defend your home field. They're 2-0 against teams at home in the Big Ten. So they've done what they've needed to do. They've won the games that they've supposed to have won, and the games that were kind of a toss up. Early on, I'd say the Virginia Tech game. Never knowing how they're going to be. They're a good opponent out of the ACC. Northwestern in the opener. And then last week at Indiana, they've won the games that were on the schedule preseason, saying these are must-win games, and that's what's gotten them the 6 wins so far.
And how much, there's been some comparisons already to your freshman year, 2005, and kind of that first team under Shiano's first run that was able to get to a bowl game. How much similarity, I guess, do you see in terms of being able to win those games that you talked about? Matchup games, winnable games, and while they haven't necessarily beaten a winning team on their schedule yet, they've beaten all the games that they needed to win so far. How important is that in the development of a program in terms of taking that next step?
Yeah, I mean, if you just go back to last year, that didn't happen, right? So it happened this year, and you can say, whatever you want. You can only play the teams that are on your schedule, and obviously the schedule is going to get a little more difficult as we get into November here. But for the fact that they've beaten the teams that they've lined up and played that they were supposed to beat and they had a chance to beat, they play Michigan tough into the third quarter or really into the fourth quarter, and a wide receiver screen gets intercepted, which I've never seen in like the history of college football, for a pick six. So, but they're playing them tough on the road, 17-7 in the fourth quarter, against the number 2 or 3 team in the country, whatever they're ranked right now. So, I think there's been improvement and there's been development in the program, and you've been able to see it on Saturdays, which is so important because again, I think we talk about this back, during training camp in the off season, that there can be development that happens without winning games, and people don't want to hear that because it's all about winning and losing. They've been able to go through that development, and fortunately for them, they've been able to develop and win, which is so important because now going forward, they're going to get those extra 15 practices this offseason, and that's, or not even the offseason, this bowl season. And that's where the young guys really develop and really have a chance to play. And it springboards them into the spring where they get to play again, and then training camp in the following year. So it's just a cycle that they haven't had a chance to really get through yet that they're finally going to get, which is extremely important for all those guys.
And you had it both ways as a player in terms of, achieving bowl eligibility pretty early on. And obviously you guys had, even more to play for in terms of division titles. But then you had other seasons where, you were going to that last couple games getting bowl eligible. How much does you think it helps this specific team now, going into that final month, harder competition, but knowing they have that bowl game in their pocket? Do you think it'll positively impact their mentality, so to speak? Maybe play a little bit looser? What type of, I guess, any change in helping them now that things will get tougher?
Yeah, you know what? I don't think so. I think if they had have lost to Indiana and still had to find one to get bowl eligible, that's when you start to press. That's when, it becomes a little more difficult. I think right now, though, this team, they have an identity. They know who they are on both sides of the ball, really all 3 phases of the game: offense, defense, and special teams. They're going to run the football on offense. They're going to try to set up third and shorts. They're going to protect the quarterback, who's gotten better as time's gone on. The defense is going to play, at an extremely high level. I think, as good of a defense as you can find in the Big Ten Conference. So for them, they're just going to continue to play with confidence. They're going to continue to do what they do. And really, as an outsider, a media person, a fan, I think this team really has an identity finally, which they haven't had in such a long time. And it's really good to see because, those players, the kids, the coaches can fall back on who they are and what they've talked about all year when times gets tough. And I think that they've done that at certain points during the season.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think it starts with the identity of the offense with the run game and Kyle Monangai leading the Big Ten in rushing right now. Obviously, you coached him in high school. How much fun has it been to see his development this year and become the player that he has, not just as a rusher, but seeing the blocking clips and just a complete football player and how important he is to the success of this team.
Yeah, I mean, listen, everyone sees it on Saturday because he's been so good at really everything. He's been an every down back, whether it's running the football, whether it's, pass protection, whether it's third and short when they need a guy to fall forward for a yard. He's really done all of it, but it starts in the offseason, and he was committed to the weight room. He's committed to being, a big time college football player. And you can see the work that he's done in the offseason in the weight room with Jay Butler and with the strength staff translate to the field. He's run away from guys this year where he hasn't in the past. Like, he hasn't been able to break those 50, 60 yarders for touchdowns because he gets caught. This year he's outrunning everyone. And I think that's a credit not only to the strength staff and JB, but to him, to being committed to really continuing the transformation of his body and then going out and playing on Saturdays. And again, it all goes back to being able to be out there and play. He's a physical player. He runs the ball really hard. Uh, and I'm sure he's not feeling great most of the time just because of the way that he plays and the physicality that he brings to the game. But he gets up every time and he gets back in the huddle and he does it over and over and over again. And he's made the defense quit, as the season's gone on and the game's gone on, and he's continued to play.
And talking about another player that's faced a lot of adversity is Gavin Wimsatt. You kind of hinted at his improvement throughout the season. I obviously he still has a little bit of struggles with accuracy, but at the same time, I think just his ability to respond to adversity for me has been what's most impressive. He hasn't ever really gotten rattled. He continues to battle and he continues to make plays when he has to make plays. I thought that fourth down conversion, pass play to Dremel was huge in that game against Indiana. What's impressed you most about him and his development this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just said the word development, and there's been development. Everyone wants him to be ready to go win the Heisman, right? And that's just not realistic, right? Uh, I think for what he's been given and the pieces that have surrounded him, he's done exactly what the coaching staff has wanted, right? He hasn't necessarily lost him any games. So he didn't play great last week. People will say he hasn't thrown for a ton of yards and all that, but Kyle Monangai is leading the Big Ten in rushing. That's what they're going to do. That's what they want to be. They want to run the football. His job is to make sure they stay on the field, convert third downs, convert fourth downs, continue drives, eat up clock, control the football. And he's done everything that they've asked him to do. And, I think I was just speaking with someone else, I think earlier this morning. There's been times where the game, you can really see that it had slowed down for him, right? He's seeing things clean. He's getting through progressions. And then there's other times where it's still moving a little quick, but that's expected to be a young player and a young quarterback. And, a kid really who's in this system for the first year, right? Kirk Shiraka got here in January or February, whenever it was. So, it hasn't even been a full calendar year since he's been learning the system. I think he's done a very good job, of what they've asked him to do. And to your point, he's made critical game-changing plays when needed. And ultimately, you look at the course of a game. There's 2 or 3 plays in each phase that wins you the game. You don't necessarily know it then, but that fourth down conversion that you just mentioned, that's one of those critical plays that keeps him on the field and ultimately changes the game. And he's been able to make those so far. And I anticipate that he's going to continue to get better and he's going to continue to make plays like that.
The offensive line, has I think been a bit of a pleasant surprise this year. Pat Flaherty, obviously a great offensive line coach. They've kind of settled in on a starting rotation now. The last, I guess, 2 or 3 games now. Reggie Sutton making an amazing comeback. How impressive you've been in terms of just the development they've had, and Indiana. I mean, they really were just like controlling the game from the start, and I think from where we maybe thought they were at the beginning of the year to now, just how much progress do you think they really have made?
Yeah, I mean, I think you start with that Reggie Sutton story. It's pretty remarkable, right? And I didn't realize how intense and really bad that injury was. Just not being really involved with the program when it did happen, or paying as much attention as I should have. So that's just an unbelievable story, and couldn't be more proud and happy for him. But I think you look at what Pat Flaherty has done, and I think that the success that Rutgers has been able to have running the football is directly correlated to the impact that Pat Flaherty's had on the offensive line and really the whole offense. Right. Again, they have that identity that they haven't necessarily had in the last couple of years. They're going to run the football. They're going to lean on you. They're going to, get these fourth and shorts late in the game when they want to continue to run the clock out. Michigan State, they got the ball back with 7 minutes and they finished with taking a knee. That's hard to do, and you can say again, whatever you want about Michigan State, they're still Big Ten guys that lined up across from them. They were able to do that. Same thing with Indiana, running the football late in the game when they need to end the football game. Truly, I think that the remarkable turnaround and being able to run the football is directly correlated to, Coach Pat Flaherty.
And speaking more on the offense, the wide receiver group, obviously they've had some adversity, missing Chris Long and Nassim Brantley most of the year. Just in terms of they haven't had one particular guy become a star, but all four of them, Dremel obviously has been the most consistent, but then you have Isaiah Washington's had a good year, Jaquay Jackson, freshman Ian Strong. How impressive have you been in terms of like Dave Brock, his ability to get the most out of these guys?
I think the biggest challenge with those guys is, Rutgers just hasn't really thrown the ball a lot. So to keep those guys engaged, right? They're receivers. They want to go out and they want to catch the ball, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what every receiver wants to do. But for Dave Brock to be able to keep them engaged, keep them, continuing to block in the secondary and block downfield, that's hard to ask. And people will say, well, that's what they're supposed to do when they don't run a pass. So yeah, but when you throw the ball 13 times in a game and you're asking a receiver to go block 55, 60 times, that's a lot. And I think he's done a really good job of developing those guys and really doing whatever needs to be done to win the game. You talk about the development of some of the players, like, no one would have said Christian Dremel would have been kind of the prime third down conversion receiver that's going to, we always knew that he had some ability to move in the slot and get himself open, but he's run routes vertical down the field. He's run routes inside, matched up against linebackers or safeties, and he's continued to win, week in and week out. And like you mentioned, some of the younger guys have started to develop. A guy like Ian Strong, he reminds me of a guy who I played with named Kenny Britt as a freshman. Played a little early on, got a little more confident, started to play more and more, and then by the end of the year was seeing significant snaps. That's how it was for Kenny, and I think that's kind of what's happening with Ian out there. There's not many guys on the roster that look like him. So you got to find a way to give him something he's comfortable with, but he'll be able to go out there and run routes and catch the ball. So overall, I think they've done a good job. Haven't had a ton of opportunities, but when they have, for the most part, they've stepped up and made plays to either stay on the field or score touchdowns.
You mentioned it before, Jay Butler, strength coach. I think one thing that's really stood out, even against Wisconsin and Michigan, is that this team looks like a Big Ten team now, and I think their physicality, the way they, you mentioned the blocking. Everyone blocks on offense. Everyone swarms the ball on defense. How important has that, I guess, being in year 4, having that strength program under Butler, be a direct correlation to what we're seeing now on the field?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always in any college program, the most important guy outside the head coach is a strength coach, because they spend the most time with that guy. They spend 3/4 of the year with the strength coach in a weight room, and even during the season they're still spending 1 or 2 days a week doing recovery and doing maintenance and doing maintain lifts and stuff like that. So I think JB has proven time after time that he's one of the best in the country. He's really changed the way that they physically look. If you put the starting 11 on each side, offense and defense up against any team, physically they're going to look just as good as the other guys. The thing that Rutgers is still lacking in the Big Ten is that overall team depth, on both sides of the football, but much better, much better than it's been. And it only continued to get better as these young freshmen that have been recruited come in, get into the program. It takes 2 or 3 years for some of those guys to really develop and be ready to go. But the bowl and getting those 15 extra days of practice is going to help expedite that process for so many of these guys. I think we'll come into the spring next year and say, man, a lot of these guys developed a lot during this offseason, and you can go back and credit it to those 15 practices during bowl prep.
So I got to ask you about the Michigan State game. Chris Carlin gave you credit. I was listening to you on the radio, and that you had mentioned before the muff punt that turned the whole game around. That you kind of hinted that we need this to happen for things to change. I guess how amazing was it to call that fourth quarter live, and just the momentum that built from that. And I guess were you surprised that when that first play happened, how quickly they were able to turn the tide?
Yeah, I mean, that game, you look at it, and for 3 quarters, Rutgers got dominated. They couldn't really do anything. They had zero momentum. They had, kind of that look on the sideline. It's like, here we go again. And they just needed a spark, and they couldn't do it on offense. They weren't able to create scoring opportunities on defense. They got a couple turnovers, but it was just one of those days for the team. And then, they had, I think it was an illegal formation or whatever the penalty was. And right before that break, I said to Chris and Eric, I said, man, it would be great if the punter, drops the snap here. The ball's wet. It's a terrible day out. Needs something like that to happen. And then it happens. And then talk about a game of momentum shift, right? It goes polar opposite for both teams. Rutgers sideline is bouncing up and down. Michigan State has their head down. They're hiding under the canopies because of the weather. And just everything went right. I mean, who would have drawn up that Michigan State lines up an onside kick, special teams kick return 2 times in a row with 10 and a half minutes left in the fourth quarter? I don't know how you do that. It's beyond me. And, but you give credit to Rutgers. They saw it the first time. They kicked it away and they got the touchback. They lined up, and the second time, Michigan State lined up in the same defense or the same, kick return defense, and they pooch it down there, and the ball bounces their way, which obviously you need that to have a comeback like they had, and and then the rest of is history. So credit to the team for continuing to fight, finally getting that one break, and then really the floodgates open and the momentum completely switched for them.
And we haven't talked too much about the defense. Just a couple more for you, but just in terms of the step that this defense has taken under Joe Harris-Simiak's second year, and so many veterans back on this defense, how impressive you've been just with their performance and their ability to kind of take that next step this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've been great. They've added a couple additions. I think of Flip Dixon in the back end at safety. He's done a very good job. I mean, he's been all over the field. I mentioned that on the radio against Michigan State too. He's literally, involved in every play, run and pass. He's been a real difference maker back there. I think overall they probably haven't gotten as good as they can be right now. The defensive line, I think, has played good, but not great, because they have the ability with some of those guys up front to play great. The linebacking group, I think, has played very well. The loss of Tareem Powell, I think, is going to be pretty significant. I mean, he's been playing, at All-American type, caliber defensive player so far this season. And so, that's a big loss for them. And I think it'll be tough to make up that type of, player and the numbers that he brings. But you look at guys, across the board, I think that overall the defense under the defensive coaching staff, they know who they are. They know what they want to be. They're sound. They don't have a lot of mental errors. They have some physical times where they just get beat, which, as a coach, that's okay. But they line up, they play fast, they know what their assignments are, they're well coached. They kind of look like a Shiano defense. And they've given really the team a chance to win just about every game they've played so far this year.
Yeah, and I think one thing that stands out too is, like, if you think about, like, who's the MVP of the defense, I think you come up with four, between Dixon, Mo Toure, Aaron Lewis, Longerbeam has been fantastic. I mean, there's been so many guys that have stepped up and been great. Toure's been a great story as well. In terms of his injury return, how important has his comeback been for the development of the defense?
I think, I mean, for the defense, it's perfect timing, right? Especially with Powell going down, because last year and in his career so far, he's been an edge guy where he's a pass rusher, and he's very good at it. But now he's playing linebacker. He's standing up. He's dropping in, on passing situations. He's dropping into zones and playing zone defense. He's rerouting receivers off the line of scrimmage. I mean, he looks the part and he's playing the part. And he's been able to diversify his game. He's able to do so many different things, which, they really didn't ask him to do in the past. But to have a guy like him be able to step in and now play, I would assume that he's probably going to play a lot of the inside linebacker position with Tareem going down. It's nice to be able to have a guy of that caliber step in, and be able to make plays for you.
So looking ahead for November, obviously they have Ohio State coming in a week and a half. They're also going to be at Penn State. You have, at Iowa and Maryland as well. You talked about their identity and being a running team. I guess, how much do you expect maybe them to open things up a little bit in terms of the pass game when they face Ohio State? Do you think that, maybe they'll take a few more chances or is it really about just doing what they do best in terms of that run game and even trying to, do that against Ohio State?
I think the game dictates that, right? I think they know who they are, they know who they want to be. So, 2 weeks from now when they play Ohio State, the first quarter, if they come out 0-0 or 3-0 or 7-0, but they've had some success running the ball, they obviously are want to slow down the game. I think they continue to do what they do. And, until it gets to like a two score game, that's when maybe you have to start to press a little bit and open it up because, listen, Ohio State can score. They have the best receiver in college football on that team. They have talent across the board, but if you keep it close and you're able to play your game, you do what you do. If it starts to get away a little bit and you start to have to score, then you're going to have to open it up. But I think overall, you've gotten the 6-2 at this point of the season by doing what you've done. You go on the road. Obviously you have Ohio State, but then you go on the road to Iowa and Penn State. Iowa, you play your game. It's going to be a low scoring slugfest. It's going to be old school Big Ten football. It might be 7-0 the winner. Iowa's offense isn't very good. Rutgers defense is good, and Iowa's defense is good, and Rutgers offense is not as good as the defense right now, right? So you go in there, you're going to play your game. You go out to Penn State, you can probably again play your game there too, and keep it close. Again, Penn State's a very good team this year, but you keep it close and you have a chance in the fourth quarter to win, and then you finish at home against Maryland, and who knows what team you get there. Maryland's kind of been one or the other. They've been a little bipolar. They're either scoring 50 points or they're scoring 10 points. So hopefully you get them when they're not clicking on offense, and you control the game and you slow it down and you run the football, and you come out of there and you win 2 out of the last 4, and you end up with 8 wins on the season. That's a pretty darn good year. A lot of people sign up for that at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, that would be amazing, and obviously would improve their bowl projection status as well. Last question for you, just in terms of what you're looking for most in terms of the development of this team the last 4 weeks of the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, I think in 3 phases. On offense, play a complete game and score points when you get opportunities. The defense has created turnovers this year for you, and you haven't really been able to convert on those opportunities. So I think that goes to giving a little more to Wimsatt as the season has gone on, and continuing to give him a little more and throwing the ball down the field. And that intermediate and deep stuff makes it a lot easier to run the football when you're able to complete some of those 15, 18 yard in routes, and then some of those vertical deep balls down the field. Even if you don't hit them, it gets the secondary thinking about it a little bit. And I know going forward they're going to see a lot of too high defenses. So if you can get those safeties to start to think a little bit about the pass instead of be downhill and a run right away, it's going to help to open it up. Defensively, I think for them to call this year a success, their defensive line is going to have to turn it up. Aaron Lewis and those guys are going to have to get after the passer, and they're going to have to really cause problems in the backfield, both in the run game and in the pass game. You can't ask the secondary to be in man coverage one-on-one, for 4 or 5 seconds at a time. So get to the quarterback, and then on special teams, try to steal some. Right? They got one last week. They stole a block punt against Indiana. Try to steal something, block field goal, block punt, a kick return to change field position, whatever it might be. But don't lose the game in that phase. And I think overall they've got a good setup to go into this last quarter of the season.
Rutgers great Mike Teel, always a pleasure to talk to you. We all look forward to your call against Ohio State in 2 weeks. Thanks so much for being here and all your great insight once again.
Appreciate it, Aaron. Thanks for having me.